Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello, and before we begin, Happy New Year, of course. Hope all of you had an amazing 2023, a great New Year's Eve, and hopefully this coming year is even better. Today, we'll be picking up on a topic that we briefly touched on in our last video, and that is, why did Grand Admiral Thrawn, the great strategist of the Empire, not get his own personal Super Star Destroyer? And I say great strategist, but Thrawn was almost undeniably the most talented military mind in the entirety of the Empire. Now, one thing that I always hear is, oh, Grand Admiral Thrawn didn't get a Super Star Destroyer because he wouldn't want one. He liked more flexible vessels, but that's nonsense. Grand Admiral Thrawn would have advised against the building of Super Star Destroyers. At least in Star Wars canon, we see that. He thinks the Death Star is a huge mistake, that the money would be better invested in both the TIE Defender program and just beefing up the Imperial Navy generally. But if the ship is already built, the man, or the Chiss, is not saying no. The things Thrawn can do with a Super Star Destroyer would probably be an interesting topic for another video, but I mean, it's the most powerful warship ever constructed in the galaxy. It has no equal within any other navy, but it's also a lot more than that. It's a symbolic thing. I can imagine Thrawn using the Super Star Destroyer merely as a distraction, pretending that it's his flagship while leading the Chimera elsewhere to keep rebels or other enemies off their guard. Or he could just use the Super Star Destroyer as it's designed, like a hammer. Maybe it's that first battle it enters which is its most decisive. I don't know. Either way, Thrawn would find uses for it. If not as an outright weapon of war, there's one thing that Thrawn would have loved to have the Super Star Destroyer for, and that is a base of operations in the unknown region. We talked about this in a prior video, but during the Galactic Civil War, Thrawn was out at the edge of the galaxy in the unknown regions, creating bases, shipyards, repositories of information, basically a mini empire. A Super Star Destroyer would have been an excellent base of operations, even if just in orbit over some planet. I can imagine that Thrawn may have hidden the SSD and set up his cloning facility there, and in that case it wouldn't have gotten washed out as his real clone did, but that's neither here nor there. The real reason that Thrawn didn't get a Super Star Destroyer is one I kind of alluded to in our last video, and that is, put simply, political reasons. I do want to delve into this concept a bit more here. So one thing you really need to understand about the Empire's Super Star Destroyers and other really big building projects is that they were lightning rods for controversy and even dissent within the higher political echelons of the Empire and the military. The Essential Guide to Warfare says the following: Navy traditionalists were aghast, fearing that further efforts could bankrupt the Empire. Fleets of patrol boats, frigates, and cruisers struck the traditionalists as much more effective for policing the vastness of space. To those who thought the Star Destroyer sufficient for policing the galaxy, battle cruisers and dreadnoughts lumped together under the derisive tag Super Star Destroyers seemed like sops to the bottomless egos and ambitions of Moffs and Imperial advisors, not pieces of any coherent military strategy. The Super Star Destroyer was also, rightly, seen as a vestment of power in whomever was given control of the ship. For example, members of the Imperial military attempted to sabotage construction of the Executor at Fondor because they saw it as a threat to their own power, and again, rightly. When it comes to the Executor herself, it gave Vader immense power. If you're familiar with the story of Shadows of the Empire, although the video game doesn't quite show this, you probably know how the Executor allowed Vader to take out arguably his chief rival to Palpatine's ear, Prince Shizor, and his Skyhook. He basically blasted the thing out of space. Otherwise, it gave Vader command of not just the massive vessel, but also the accompanying fleet, Death Squadron, with him basically having free reign to do whatever possible to track down Luke Skywalker. Ignoring the Lusankya, which was its own sort of secret Palpatine thing, the first class of Executors, you could call it, saw 4 ships: the Executor herself, the Reaper, the Aggressor, and the Brawl. All of these ships went to extremely highly placed military officers in important, crucial sections of the galaxy. As the Essential Guide to Warfare explains, the Aggressor went to another Grand Admiral Grunger, and was a key component to Inner Rim security. The Brawl was in the Quelly Over sector under the command of the famous Zinj, while the Reaper went to Grand Moff Ardis Kane. These were, of course, not the only Super Star Destroyers built, but these were the most well-known ones, and there was definitely a lot of thought given into who would be rewarded with these massive vessels. Now, this wasn't the first or the only time Palpatine would do something like this. I've talked in past about how Palpatine's most loyal sycophants got to go to Biss in the deep core. They couldn't leave, so whether they enjoyed that, I don't know, your mileage may vary. But in the Crystal Star, we also learn of the world craft. These weren't offensive weapons, but were essentially mini planets capable of traveling through hyperspace. Pretty nice. So the problem is here, giving Thrawn a superstar destroyer may have started a political shitstorm which even Palpatine could have had trouble dealing with. Thrawn, due mostly to his alien status, was becoming a persona non grata within the Empire. I talked about that in a prior video, so the official story was that he was essentially sent out to the unknown regions as a form of punishment. Now, the reality is, as we discussed, Thrawn was really setting up something that would help the Empire survive whatever storm would come from the unknown regions or beyond, but this was about the same time the Super Star Destroyers were starting to roll off the shipyards, so giving one to Thrawn before sending him away would have been quite strange, and Palpatine really didn't need to do that because there's even the implication that Super Star Destroyers may have traveled to the unknown regions anyway. We can't be sure. That's one thing the Essential Guide to Warfare mentions. Super Star Destroyers were useful in a way because they were so expensive. They could hide the cost of other, even more large projects like super weapons or whatever was going on in the Proto-Dark Empire. And also, Thrawn just didn't need it. Like I said, if he were offered one, I think he would have taken it, but during the Galactic Civil War, a lot of what Thrawn was doing was intelligence and operations based, whether trying to disrupt rebel supply lines, hunting Zarin. Like, his mobility, I think, was more of a benefit alongside his mind. The Super Star Destroyers were probably better placed in areas where they could serve more of a psychological and even military role. Now, things did change, of course, after the Battle of Endor, and specifically when Thrawn emerged from the unknown regions to wage a massive campaign against the New Republic. At that point, yeah, he probably could have used a Super Star Destroyer, and the thing is, he almost got one. Artus Kane gave Thrawn control over the Pentastar Alignment's military forces, except the Reaper, something that he was actually reconsidering before Thrawn's death. But even then, we know that Thrawn generally instructed the Imperial warlords who had rallied behind him to maintain their existing forces in a mostly defensive position so that the New Republic couldn't come in and sweep away their territory, while he was collecting assets more responsibly and using hit and run techniques. It was really only the final battle of the war, the Battle of Bilbringi, where Thrawn actually didn't have enough ships to win the battle outright. Bit of a miscalculation from him, a failure to account for the Smugglers' Alliance. The Super Star Destroyer could have easily tipped the scales, even if just waiting in reserve. That would have been a pretty insane ace up Thrawn's sleeve. That's not to say he would have lost the Battle of Bilbringi, but he was assassinated before we found out really what he was going to do. But that's all I've got for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Until next time, be safe, have a good one. Let me know if you've got any questions you'd like to say below with the hashtag AskEck, and I'll see you next time.